Because I'm sure that a lot of you guys are watching that are thinking like, why would you remove CO2 from such a beautiful aquarium? Maybe what I'm trying to say here makes no sense whatsoever. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you will know that most of my tanks have CO2 injection. And in my early days I tried growing plants without CO2, but they just didn't look as good. Now plants grow a lot faster when you are using CO2 injection, which is nice, especially when you have a new setup. But when your tank has been up and running for a few months already, and it kind of already looks perfect, you kind of wish the plants would stop growing so fast. At least that's how I feel sometimes. So in this corner of the house we have the 70 and the 35 liter Scapers tanks, which are both doing absolutely amazing. So the 35 liter Scapers tank is housing the fancy Galaxy pinto tiger shrimp, which are almost always hiding. I barely ever see them. Oh, but here's one right there. Hello there. These shrimp are doing really good. We did have one casualty the first day after I released them into this aquarium. So I guess he had some issues during the transition. But we're not really talking about this aquarium right now. Today we're focusing on the 70 liter Scapers tank, which is also doing really good. This one is coming up to almost 1 year old. It's now basically, I would say, 11 months old. I've scaped this in beginning of December last year, and it's now the beginning of November. Let me actually turn off the CO2 because you can't see anything with all these micro bubbles. Right, here we go. Now we have a clear view. So yeah, almost 1 year old. Pretty simple layout. I mean, we just stacked a bunch of lava rocks on top of each other until we had these two rock formations. Then we covered that with a moss paste and did a dry start, so the moss would attach itself to the rocks, and that, yeah, just turned into this. So we have two large rock formations that are covered in Fissidens fontanus, also known as phoenix moss. And I really like how it looks, but it's a lot of maintenance to keep up with it. It's been just 2 months since I trimmed it completely back. We did a huge trimming session on the moss, and I think I've done this three times now. And trimming this moss is just a lot of work. Like on average, a maintenance session like that just takes 4 or almost 5 hours. So this aquarium will actually be rescaped really soon, but before we do that, I'm going to do a little fun experiment. So basically on the channel I've been doing some funny experiments with CO2. So we did CO2 tablets, we did sparkling water, and now I want to do an experiment to see what happens when you remove CO2 from a high-tech tank. So this aquarium has had CO2 during its entire lifetime. So what's going to happen if you remove CO2? So I'm curious to find that out. So we're going to do no CO2 for an entire month and just see what happens. Now before we start this experiment, I want to do a little bit of a maintenance session on this aquarium. So I want to clean the inlet and the outlet from the filter because they're a bit dirty. I want to do a water change, and I want to trim some of these stems off because they're a bit too long. And I want to clean up the sand path because we have a bit of an issue here. There's a gap over there where some aquasoil is being spilled onto the sand. So we need to clean that up. And we have all these small pebbles here. They're basically covered in black brush algae. So that doesn't look too nice. I want to replace them with some new ones. So before we start the experiment, the aquarium is looking super fresh. And then we're going to remove some CO2, see what happens. So the first thing I like to do is switch off the filter. Sometimes I keep it running just to help clean the water while I'm doing maintenance. But today we really need to clean the inflow and the outflow, so I'm switching it off. And I'm using an ALGAE filter smart on this aquarium, which also has a built-in heater. So we need to unplug that as well. If we don't unplug that, there's a chance that the inside of the filter will actually melt. So it's really important not to forget this. Next up, I like to remove some water from the aquarium, just to make sure we don't spill too much over the edge while we're cleaning the glass and everything. Now the floor is going to get wet. There's no chance of keeping things dry. I don't think I ever had a maintenance session where I didn't spill any water. Next job is to clean those dirty pipes. Now, depending on how lazy I am, I either remove the whole thing and clean it properly with bleach and everything, or like today where I'm not really in the mood to do that, I just keep it simple and just run a quick pipe brush through the inside of the tubes, and that's fine. Next, we are removing some of these small pebbles. I have no idea why they have so much black brush algae on them. Like, the rest of the aquarium is completely algae free, but these pebbles are covered in black brush algae. I have a lot of these small pebbles, so it's easier to just replace them rather than trying to clean them and stuff. Now, to stop the aquasol from spilling onto the sand, I'm stuffing that gap with a small piece of filter floss. This is completely safe and it might be visible for a few days, but soon the moss will grow over it and you won't be able to see it anymore. I've also siphoned out a small layer of sand together with that aquasol that got mixed in. Somehow my camera decided that was not important and decided not to film that. But anyway, now we can add a fresh layer of pebbles, gravel and sand. And I gave this a quick rinse just to make sure that the water doesn't get too cloudy.
Okay, maintenance session done. Aquarium is still a little bit cloudy from the sand and the gravel, but that gives us a perfect opportunity to talk a little bit about the how and why of this experiment. Because I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching that are thinking like, why would you remove CO2 from such a beautiful aquarium? Basically, I only have one reason. That's two. Basically, I only have one reason why I want to remove the CO2 from this aquarium, and that is to slow down the plant growth. I already said it earlier, the moss in this aquarium, it only needs to be trimmed every 2 or 3 months. But when you have to trim it, like it's just not much fun. It takes a couple of hours and it's a lot of work and it creates a huge mess. So I kind of want to avoid that as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons why I want to slow down plant growth. The second reason why I want to slow down plant growth is because here we have the combination of the lush green moss rocks and the beautiful red stems in the back. And of course the aquarium looks at its best when we have both of them. So we have the green rocks and we have the red stems. But the red stems need to be trimmed as well, and they take a long time to grow back, mainly because I'm using a lean fertilization method. So right now we're very close to that point where, in my opinion, the aquarium looks perfect. I mean, the moss is already there, but the stems just need to go a little bit taller, and then they're like at the perfect height, and the aquarium looks really, really good. But then it's a very short moment, and then very shortly after that, the stems need to be trimmed again, and then the moss becomes too big as well. And then we still have that gap in between those two big rocks, but that's going to close, and then we need to trim the moss. So there's a very short moment where the aquarium looks at its best, and that moment I want to keep for longer, you know, I want to enjoy that moment for longer, because when the moment is gone, we need to trim the stem plants again, and then it can easily take another 3 to 4 weeks before we are back to that moment again. So I'm hoping that by removing the CO2 we can basically delay the next trimming session and yeah, just enjoy the aquarium for longer as it is right now. maybe what I'm trying to say here makes no sense whatsoever. Maybe it's just, yeah, that doesn't work like that. But that's why I want to do this experiment, just to try it. Now, of course, we cannot just remove the CO2 and do nothing else. We need to make a few more changes as well. Because we have a very strong light in this aquarium, we also need to dim the lights, because if we keep the light at the same intensity, we're for sure going to get algae. And I think we also need to adjust our liquid fertilizer a little bit. I am dosing very little fertilizers, but still almost every day. So we need to bring that back as well. You know what, actually I have another reason why I want to do this experiment. Because sometimes I get really annoyed with CO2 microbubbles spoiling my view. Because even right now, with the CO2 system removed, like, it already looks so much better, you know? For me personally, the last hour of the day, the last hour of the photo period, that is basically my favorite time of the day to look at the aquarium, because that's when the CO2 system is off and there's no CO2 microbubbles spoiling the view. So yeah, I'm already enjoying it right now. But we're still at 100% intensity, so we need to start reducing the lights. Okay, here we go. This is 50%. So this is literally half the intensity of what I was at. This is still bright enough to be able to enjoy the aquarium, but not too bright that we might be running into some algae issues. So let's start with 50%. We could try to bump it up to 60, like in a week or so. See if that's possible.
Several days later.
Okay, fast forward 8 days now, so just over a week since we removed the CO2 system from this aquarium. And honestly, since that maintenance session, I haven't really done anything to this aquarium. I've fed the fish and I've added a little bit of water to account for the evaporation, but that's all. I didn't add any liquid fertilizers. I haven't seen any algae since then, and honestly the aquarium seems just fine without CO2. Now these stems, I was kind of hoping that the stems would sort of slow down a little bit and not grow so fast, but that hasn't happened. Like, they've definitely grown a few centimeters since in the past 8 days basically. But yeah, it definitely seems the aquarium is doing just fine without CO2, so I'm going to keep it going like this. I'm not going to add the CO2 back or anything. I'm going to keep it going like this until I rescape the aquarium and yeah, just see what happens. But that is the end of the video, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done this yet. Let's see if we can get to 40,000 subscribers by the end of this year. That'd be amazing. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Take care.